Chapter 516. Not all the imperial guards in the imperial palace used badges made from monster byproducts. However, it was a fact that monster byproducts were considered some of the most durable materials. Moreover, when it came to finding a material imbued with the symbolic red color of the crown prince, this was far superior to any gemstone or metal. Teeth and bones that emerged from monsters often had a red hue, and they could symbolize the glory of the first crown prince of the Or Empire, Aklan La Or, who was famous as an exceptional monster hunter under the title of Red Brilliance. Considering Ydir-Eel's sole weakness, it would be more surprising to guess that the badge wasn't made from monster byproducts. Ydir probably didn't pay much attention to what the emblem was made of. Keol the Diarca, who supplied the emblem, also likely didn't know. Considering the burden of the oath and his usual demeanor, the chance that Keol had made an informed decision was exceedingly low. However, it wasn't surprising that Ydir experienced a sensitive reaction from an object made of monster byproducts while under the influence of Kuleshat, a substance as polar opposite to his nature. Even the tiniest wound could be the final straw that leads to death if the body it inflicted was already in a precarious state, like a cup filled to the brim with water. How would it be for someone who had just barely recovered from injuries? Fever, drowsiness, and dimming of sight and hearing are common signs of intoxication, but they are also symptoms commonly experienced by those weakly poisoned. Ydir himself had merely called it intoxication, but his instinct thought otherwise. The lounge was still a mess from the objects scattered about due to the force exerted to block out anyone from approaching him. Kishir thought of Ydir, who was huddled in a dark corner of the lounge, his imperial robes thrown over him like a cloak. It was a temporary measure Enon had taken to calm him down, cloaking his eyes to forcibly soothe the beast within. However, the chill Kishir felt when he faced Ydir in that moment was like a blade slicing through him. And what about the moment when Ydir, so guarded against the outside world, leaned his head against Kishir's hand without any resistance? When the question Kishir had thrown out to lighten the atmosphere and gauge his condition was returned, Kishir La Or felt an indescribable upheaval of enormous emotions within him. Ydir-El, now unusually lucid, displayed an expression that seemed as worn and withered as the surface of a long eroded stone. His eyes, empty of anything, paradoxically let one feel the fierce tempest he must have faced. The moment Kishir wanted to know about that tempest and that as yet unknown answer, unfamiliar sensations began to stir and spread within his chest. The alien feeling of something new inserting itself among his own contained emotions felt eerily similar to the sensations they had first experienced when they became intimate. The only difference was that if the new sensation they had felt back then was a mix of pain, joy, and ecstasy, this time it was a seemingly calm but unfathomable darkness under which lay hidden a weighty sorrow. So, what should we do now, Commander? Kishir paused his thoughts at Kana's question and looked up. Sending Ydir back first and then ending the party would be easy, but doing so would erase the advantages Ydir-El had gained by drinking Kuleshat. There was no intention of ruining the sacrifices and efforts he had made to successfully conclude the day. So, there is only one thing left. The best course of action for this cavalry was to keep his condition and weakness a secret, ensuring the party ended successfully without anyone knowing the situation. Kishir calmly assessed the matters that would follow the party and spoke. How are things in the hall? So far, not bad. Everyone believes Ydir is resting without any issues. After you came over, the crown prince and the other nobles seemed a bit suspicious, but... Fine, then proceed with the party as planned. I will return to the hall shortly. Keep an eye on Ydir for a moment. Are you sure? What if Yidhir's condition changes again like before? That won't happen, don't worry. From the moment Kishir came in contact with Yidhir, his condition had rapidly stabilized. Kishir was confident that Yidhir wouldn't drastically deteriorate even if he left, especially since Yidhir had even recovered enough to dance. Inform the others that I had to meet a guest separately and can't return immediately. If someone comes to visit following my instructions, let only that person in. Kishir intended to attribute this guest to the Empress, who had vacated her seat. It wouldn't be suspicious for the Empress to secretly send someone to inquire about today's top performer. She would also readily cooperate once she heard the situation, allowing for quick resolution. It would be easier to divert attention if the Empress, rather than the Emperor, was involved. Kishir mentally reviewed the tasks and contacts he needed to make, then straightened his clothes. He had covered Yidhir with the red cloth he had been wearing around his shoulders and waist, leaving him somewhat underdressed, but he had no intention of correcting that. Before leaving the lounge, Kishir took one last glance back. The quiet figure lying there seemed peaceful, which only weighed heavier on his heart. He closed his eyes and recalled the brief smile Yidhir had shown. The small breath that had escaped when he hurriedly caught him from tripping, the awkward yet sincere smile that was rare at his age. That was reason enough to move his reluctant feet. When Yidhir came to his senses, he was told the party had ended. That alone was bewildering enough. But what startled Yidhir more was the fact that the Empress's chief maid was right in front of him. I'm glad you have awakened safely, Baron Ale. She introduced herself as Countess Aglarita Bernas. The story of how he came to be was first told by Kana, who had been tending to him, but he couldn't help but feel strangely about it. When Her Majesty, the Empress, hears that you have regained consciousness, she will be truly delighted. Aglarita appeared to be exceptionally generous, a rare sight in the palace. She didn't seem displeased even after mentioning that the Empress had sent her here due to Kishir's request, and although she seemed talkative, she didn't show excessive curiosity towards Yidhir. She smiled like a simple country wife, yet the way she maintained her composure suggested she fit perfectly as a close aide to the Empress, someone who would grow medicinal herbs herself and bring them all the way to the Sun Palace. Judging by the decent expression on Kana, who stood beside her, it seemed she too had a rather favorable impression of her. Thank you. Please also convey my deepest gratitude to Her Majesty the Empress. Of course, there is nothing better than onion soup after drinking poor quality alcohol. Make sure to have some. She answered cheerfully, but instead of getting up to leave, she unexpectedly addressed Yidhir with additional words. By the way, Baron Ale, do you have any plans to visit the Dawn Palace soon? Excuse me? Although I came here at the request of His Grace Duke Paleta, the truth is that Her Majesty the Empress has taken an interest in you, Baron Ale. She asked me to inquire about your willingness to visit, should you wake up safely. Upon Yidhir blinking his eyes, she flashed a somewhat secretive yet bitter smile. It seems many questions have arisen since your last visit to the Sun Palace. But Her Majesty said it's perfectly fine to decline if you're too burdened by the many cavalry projects, so feel free to answer. Declining wasn't on his mind at all. This was nothing but a confirmation of Kishir's plan to first stimulate the Empress's side instead of Emperor Kelusa, who had strongly rejected any attempts of treatment. However, Yidhir was momentarily displeased, sensing the Empress's thoughts in her words that he could decline the invitation even as she made it. I am fine with it. If Her Majesty, the Empress, calls for me, I can go at any time. Please relay that for future reference. Upon hearing the quiet yet prompt acceptance, Aguilera's expression brightened. She then said she would contact the cavalry later and exited the lounge. The next person he made eye contact with was Kana.